The sky over the human colony on planet Nareda darkened as heavy, pitch-black clouds converged and the first rumble of thunder echoed across the vast fields. The city, known for its peaceful existence and flourishing botanical richness, braced itself for the approaching storm. Inside, people sought shelter, while outside, a boy with big dreams and adventurous curiosity prepared to attempt something unique. Then Johnson Wong, a boy with a passion for science and adventure, had devised a bold experiment. With a homemade lightning rod he had assembled from old metal parts and batteries, he aimed to capture and store the raw energy of a lightning strike. He had positioned himself far outside the city. In the endless fields, ready to put his crazy idea into action, the wind tugged at his clothes, and the first raindrops began to dot the ground. Dan's heart raced with excitement as he drove the lightning rod's antenna into the soil and checked the wiring. The storm was no ordinary one. Several miles away, Mei Wong, Dan's mother, was busy analyzing sensor data. "How close is the comet?" asked a colleague, on the verge of entering the atmosphere. "And you're sure this thing is harmless? Won't it cause a massive impact?" Mei shook her head. "No. It's too small for that. And as I've explained 1,000 times, the comet is mostly made of ice and hollow inside. It will simply burn up in the atmosphere. There's no danger." "But..." The colleague raised his eyebrows. "Wait a minute. I don't like the way you're emphasizing the word but. Is it dangerous after all?" Mei sighed. "Well, our long-range sensors only detected the rough composition of the asteroid. But now that it's so close, I'm getting entirely different readings." "What kind of readings?" Mei scratched her head. "Well, the interior doesn't seem entirely hollow. I'm detecting biosignatures." "Biosignatures? Aliens? Damn, we need to report this." "Yes, we definitely should." Mei confirmed. "It could be anything, intelligent beings, pathogens, or something else. But what puzzles me the most are the effects on our weather. A comet can influence a planet, but it can't trigger a storm. Something's not right here." Her colleague grew increasingly anxious. We need to inform the military." "I already did," Mei said. "They requested all our data hours ago. I've been sending updates almost every minute since. But it's time to alert the local authorities as well. People need to be prepared for more than just a storm. We don't know what to expect." Her colleague picked up the phone and dialed the contact for the city office. As the number connected, he asked, "But how can there be life on an ice asteroid?" Mei shrugged. "No idea. Normally." Then her eyes widened. It's slowing down. The object is decelerating. It's not a comet. It's a spaceship." Lily had no idea the weather could change so quickly. It seemed like the bright blue sky had turned into a cloud-covered one within minutes, clouds that couldn't have been darker. The wind picked up, and the first raindrops began to fall. Then the wind grew worse and worse. Fortunately, she had just made it home. She shuddered to think what would have happened if she had been caught in the storm on her way back from school. She closed the door behind her and watched as the rain started to pour down in torrents. She turned and walked into the living room, but apparently, no one was there. No one home? But where was her brother? She glanced at her communicator. She hadn't even noticed the message she had received 15 minutes ago. "Hey sis, I'm going out to test my lightning rod. I can't miss a storm like this. Don't worry, I'll be back soon. Your weird brother." "What the hell? Is he outside? Now? With a lightning rod?" Her eyes widened. He could only be in the field, the most dangerous place to be right now. Quickly, she grabbed her raincoat and headed outside, where stormy winds lashed the rain against her face. It was incredibly hard to move forward. Everywhere was fog, heavy rain, and strong wind. How was this even possible when it had been bright sunshine just a few minutes ago? Then she saw him. Her brother was on a hill, right next to the metal antenna. He's insane. That's incredibly dangerous. The first lightning bolts flickered on the horizon, thunder rumbled through the area, and it was only a matter of time before lightning struck here. "Hey Dan. What are you doing?" Take that thing down immediately. We need to go home. Lily, go back. This is an important experiment. Then called out as he saw his sister approaching. That really is a one-man fighter. 4 giants. Gasped Than, standing with his mouth agape. The alien had bluish skin that seemed to glow faintly, and every time lightning flashed, the silhouette of the giant was clearly visible. Fearfully, Lily tugged at her brother's arm. Okay. I think we've seen enough. Let's get out of here. She pulled him along through the still torrential rain, soon feeling the ground shake. Again and again. Were those footsteps? When she looked back, she saw the giant was indeed moving. In their direction. This day couldn't get worse. Run. Lily screamed, pulling her little brother harder. They ran as fast as they could, feeling the tremors grow stronger. They barely dared to look back and just kept running. What was this creature? And why was it so enormous? And more importantly, why was it here? After what felt like an eternity of sprinting, they reached their house, gasping for breath. Lily yanked the door open and slammed it shut behind them. Nervously, they stood by the closed door, drops of water falling from their drenched clothes, while the tremors outside grew more intense. The shaking became so violent that all the furniture in the house rattled. More and more. Then a lamp fell from the ceiling. A cabinet toppled over, then screamed loudly as everything went dark, and with an explosive crash, the ceiling caved in. Lily quickly threw herself protectively over her brother, pulling him aside, and both rolled across the floor. A beam from the roof landed just behind them. They held their hands over their ears amid the noise and chaos. Panting, Lily looked up and saw where the living room had been. There was now just a wall of bluish skin. A foot, with a rumble, the foot lifted, chunks and pieces of their house and dust falling from its sole. It thundered and shook again, then the monster was gone. At least, they hoped so. The roof was gone, and the 2 children were exposed to the rain again. Shivering, Lily crawled across the floor and tried to look out the broken window. She could still see the bluish giant monster. At least it's back. It seemed to be moving away and heading toward the city. She still heard the continuing thunderous footsteps and the screams of people. Is it gone? Her brother asked in a trembling voice. She nodded quietly. I think so. Cautiously, she stood up and walked to the remains of the living room. The house was destroyed right in the middle, flattened under the giant's foot. Where part of the garden and half the house had been, there was now only a huge footprint. And it wasn't just their house, the neighbor's house was also half destroyed. In the same footprint, this creature was so enormous that at least 2 houses fit under its bare foot, but the most shocking thing was something else. Lily's eyes widened when she saw it. A few completely crushed bodies were also in the footprint. Their neighbors, Lily counted. 1, 2, 3, 4. 5, they're all dead. It got them all. Just crushed them underfoot. What are you saying? Her brother asked nervously. But as he tried to come to her, Lily held him back. Don't come closer. We should find a hiding place where we'll be safe and dry. Maybe the basement, if it's still intact. And then we'll call Mom and Dad. We have to warn them. Her brother trembled. Why? Is it heading towards the city? Lily nodded. It is. And it doesn't seem friendly at all. Lily's observation was correct. In the city, people were experiencing firsthand how unfriendly the giant alien was. People ran screaming through the streets, trying to find safety in buildings or reach their cars or aircraft, but most couldn't escape. With malicious precision, the giant alien's feet came down on as many people as possible, mercilessly crushing them into paste. Whether men, women, or children, all were equally trampled by the giant pilot as if they were worthless insects, pests to be eradicated. Again and again, screaming people were squashed under the bluish soles. Sometimes quickly and sometimes the giant took its time, crushing the panicked people slowly to fully savor the moment. A woman with 2 children, who had just reached her car and was about to get in, was suddenly enveloped by bluish skin. A second later, she found herself and her 2 children in the palm of the giant being. Full of fear, she looked up and caught a glimpse of the monster's face staring directly at her. Lightning flashed in the background. It was a scene straight out of a nightmare. What do you want? She stammered in terror. The amphibian-like kaiju grinned. I was just looking for something to eat. With these words, it opened its mouth and tossed the small humans into its cavernous maw. The woman and her children landed on the giant, slippery tongue, immediately noticing the rows of enormous, sharp teeth above them. The mouth closed, and it went dark. Sienna. Kyle. She called out for her children, but there was no response. She only heard a loud crunching sound and feared the worst. Then she felt the movements of the tongue beneath her. Lifted, pushed to the side, drenched in saliva that soaked her already wet clothes even more, and then the surface changed. She was on a tooth, crunch. Her consciousness faded, gulp. Meanwhile, on a distant world, Lyxe was lying at the bottom of her pool, sleeping soundly, when an ominous noise brought her back to wakefulness. Groggily, she surfaced from the water. Huh? What? What's going on? The face of a holographic Asian woman appeared right in front of her. Lyxe. There's an emergency. An inhabited planet is under attack. Lyxe was instantly wide awake. What? By the giants? Maybe that Ulrika. Sue shook her head. I can't say. But my sensors are detecting numerous life signs disappearing. You need to hurry. Lyxe leapt out of the pool, tried to stand hastily, slipped, and slammed into a table. Ouch. Maybe I should take it slower with wet feet. She got up and carefully headed outside. It was still the middle of the night, and the stars shone beautifully in the sky. In her garden, she saw the lights of the many small settlements in glass boxes embedded in the ground. Everything was calm and peaceful. At least here. She activated her wrist computer and reviewed Sue's report. Several thousand life signs had already vanished. It was a full-blown catastrophe. Quickly, she activated her shield and then opened a glowing portal, stepping through it into the unknown. May stared at the screen, horrified by the news. Ever since she realized that the object in the sky was a spaceship, she had anticipated many things, but not that the pilot would be a kaiju-like creature. The being was stomping through the suburban streets, heading straight for the city center, where most of the people were. Initial reports claim there are already hundreds of casualties, remarked a blonde colleague beside her. Almost nonchalantly. Do you think we might be in danger too? I mean, this thing is heading toward the center. Maybe we should evacuate, but May's thoughts were elsewhere. The streets shown in the report looked all too familiar to her. She nervously chewed on her fingernails, then gasped, "Oh, damn it. That's our house." "What do you mean?" her colleague asked, confused, but May was already dashing away. She quickly grabbed her communicator and dialed her daughter's number. When Lily finally answered after what felt like an eternity, May's heart leapt with relief. "Lily. Thank goodness you're okay. What happened? Where's your brother?" "My brother is with me. We went down to the basement and hid. Thankfully, most of it is still intact. But it's raining in here because half the roof is gone and the ground floor is wrecked," Lily explained calmly. "But sweetheart, why didn't you call? I need to know what's happening." Lily's voice now sounded slightly irritated. "You have no idea what we've been through. We were nearly crushed. That monster was here, and I was terrified it would come back if it hurt us. Of course I wanted to stay hidden and quiet." May ran a hand through her hair. "Of course, sweetheart, you're right. I'm sorry, I'm just so frazzled. I'm just relieved you're both alive." She realized she was shaking badly. Out of habit, she lit a pipe to try and calm herself, but the Hoonai plant smoke wasn't helping today. "Okay. Listen, Lily. You need to stay there and wait. Right now, the giant alien is heading into the city, towards you?" Lily asked, alarmed. Her mother tried to sound calm. "I don't know. I think I'm relatively safe in this building. But your father, as a mech pilot, is out there on duty now. I'm worried, but I'm confident the military will succeed." Lily was speechless. She just stood there with her mouth open as some rainwater dripped on her head. "Are you still there, sweetheart?" Her mother's voice came through the communicator after a while. Yes. Mom. Please be careful. You should get to a shelter or something." Her mother nodded. "Yes. I'll try to." She put out the pipe, grabbed her jacket and some things from her desk, and left the office, I have to hang up now. We'll see each other later. Stay safe and don't do anything reckless. I'll try to do the same. The sky above the city was shrouded in dark clouds, casting a ghostly twilight over the landscape. Lightning flickered through the air as the gigantic form of the alien kaiju approached. The ground trembled beneath the steps of the 220-meter-tall creature, and everywhere, people ran screaming through the streets, desperately trying to find safety. In addition to the chaos, traffic was jammed in all directions, and the blaring of car horns mingled with the cries of the terrified populace, creating a cacophony of fear. Amidst this pandemonium, Tara sat behind the wheel of her car, her hands trembling as she tried to find a way out of the gridlock. Her daughter Emona sat beside her, tears streaming down her face. "Mom, what are we going to do?" Tara swallowed hard, searching for words. We have to stay calm, sweetheart. We'll find a way out of here," but her words felt hollow, and she could feel the fear tightening around her throat. Ahead of them, traffic was at a standstill, the cars jammed in an endless line, while behind them, the thundering footsteps grew louder. Part of her wanted to get out and run on foot, but fear kept her rooted in place. In the car, she felt at least a semblance of safety. The ground shook again, the vibrations resonating deep in their bones. "Mom, it's getting closer." Emona's voice was high-pitched and shrill with terror. Tara glanced in the rearview mirror and saw it too. A massive, bluish foot came crashing down on a cluster of cars and fleeing people. Crushing them all mercilessly, the kaiju took another step. Its foot descended just behind Tara's car, this time slowly, and she could see clearly how cars and panicked humans were squashed like insects under the massive weight. Tara could even hear the screams of those trapped in their vehicles as the metal frames buckled and collapsed under the pressure. The horrific crunching sounds mixed with the fading screams. She was frozen with fear, unable to make a decision or move. She was paralyzed. As the giant axolotl took its next step, casting them into a dark shadow, she leaned over and hugged Emona tightly. "I love you, sweetheart," she whispered, just before the monster's foot came down on their car. The metal was instantly flattened, and they felt the relentless pressure for a brief moment before everything went black. Crush, the enormous alien continued on its path as if nothing had happened. The remnants of the vehicles and the crushed bodies of those trapped inside were all that remained of their desperate attempt to escape. On the streets, massive footprints of the kaiju were filled with flattened cars and utterly mangled human remains. Meanwhile, a squad of advanced mech robots navigated through the alleyways. Always careful not to endanger or block the fleeing people, Captain Mar Johnson led the team. His mech, Titaness, stood at 20 meters tall, a colossus of steel and composite materials, painted a striking red and armed with plasma cannons typically used for air defense and anti-tank warfare. The other mechs in his team were equally impressive. Blitz, equipped with high-speed rocket launchers, the green Aegis, whose shield prototype offered enhanced protection, and Viper, a sleek, agile mech with purple paint and a powerful energy blade for close combat. The mechs moved slowly and carefully through the narrow streets of the city. Each step had to be taken with extreme caution to avoid accidentally stepping on a car or a fleeing person. Captain Mar Johnson sat in the cockpit of Titaness, closely monitoring the surroundings on the screens in front of him. "All units, watch out for civilians," he commanded over the communication system. "We can't cause any collateral damage." The street ahead was jammed with vehicles. People had abandoned their cars and were trying to escape on foot. It was utter chaos. The mechs had to painstakingly find their way through the traffic jam, constantly being careful not to harm anyone. "Damn," one of the pilots muttered. "We're barely making any progress here." "It's like the whole city is in panic," Mar Johnson nodded. "We have to be careful. Every wrong step could end in catastrophe." The tall buildings on either side of the street further restricted their movement. The mechs were large, but in this densely built environment, they felt confined and constrained. Another pilot chimed in. "Sir, the crowds are blocking the direct path to the kaiju. We need a plan B," Mar thought for a moment before responding. "These things are typically used in open terrain, not for situations like this. But we can try to clear a path for ourselves." "How do we do that?" the pilot asked skeptically. "Kim, you have a loudspeaker system installed in your mech, don't you? Can you try to calm the people down? You need to assure them that we can help, but only if they make way for us. Similar to emergency vehicles like ambulances or police cars. If you look closely, you'll see that some people are already trying to do this. But not enough of them. The female pilot of the green Aegis mech nodded, moved forward, and positioned herself ahead of the other mechs, then activated the loudspeaker system. A metallic, yet calming voice boomed through the streets. Attention, this is the mech task force. We are here to help you. Please remain calm and clear the middle of the streets so we can reach and stop the monster. Use only the sides of the streets for escape, staying close to the building walls. Your safety is our top priority. The people in the streets paused and looked up at the towering mechs with a mix of fear and confusion. Some began to follow the instructions, moving in a more orderly manner, while others remained frozen in their panic. Mar watched the crowd and saw a path slowly forming. Well done, Kim. All units, proceed cautiously through the cleared areas and continue to watch out for civilians. The mech started to move through the now somewhat less crowded streets. It was still challenging. But the use of the loudspeaker system was having an effect. They still had to carefully maneuver their way, but they were making progress. Sir, we are approaching the target area, a pilot reported. We have visual contact with the kaiju. Mar looked at his monitors and saw the gigantic creature stomping through the streets. All units, prepare to engage. The mechs formed up and readied their weapons. Plasma cannons charged up, and the pilots aimed at the colossal alien. But the bluish kaiju seemed to notice the threat from the mechs. It turned and stared directly at them with its glowing eyes. Aim for its legs. Fire. Mar ordered, but there are civilians in the target area. Kim objected. Her voice strained over the comms. They'll die anyway if we do nothing. That monster is trampling everyone. I said fire. Fire. Now. The pilots immediately activated their weapons, and a barrage of plasma shots and rockets rained down on the monster. The monster moved and all sorts of buildings around the kaiju exploded. Mar could clearly see the monster was falling. It crashed into several buildings, bringing them down. The ground shook violently, and dust was thrown up for miles. The rain helped settle the dust more quickly, but visibility was still severely limited. The mechs activated their headlights, the beams reflecting off the myriad falling raindrops but barely improving visibility. Can anyone see it? Mar asked. Tony, the pilot of the purple close combat mech, moved to the left while Kim took the right flank. Not yet. Tony reported, I think I've got something. Kim called after a while as she cleared some debris with her green mech. She could clearly see the bluish skin of the kaiju, but she wasn't sure exactly what she was looking at. The creature wasn't moving. What do you see? I've got the kaiju right in front of me. I think we got it. It's not moving. I'm going to take a closer look. She cleared more debris and moved her green mech closer. The monster was truly fascinating. Was that its head in front of her? She thought she could make out the contours of its face. Negative. Maintain your distance. Mar commanded over the comms. Why? Kim wanted to know and turned away to check if she still had visual contact with her team. When she looked back at the kaiju, she was staring into a massive, glowing green eye. Oh shit! Was all she could say before her mech was struck by the monster's arm. She was flung hundreds of meters and crashed into a building, losing consciousness. Damn it. It's still alive. Fire everything you've got. Now. Mar launched several rockets, but another pilot reported, I've lost visual. Where is it? If in doubt, look up. That thing is huge. But it was too late. The massive foot came down on the mech, crushing it and the pilot instantly. Boom. The ground thundered, crashed, and trembled. The other mechs tried to evade, but in the narrow streets, it was difficult. The kaiju stomped down with its massive foot, crushing another mech like a toy and flinging another aside with a powerful swipe of its tail. The remaining mechs continued firing, but the alien was too powerful. We need reinforcements. Mar gasped over the comms, trying to keep the rapidly moving kaiju in his sights. Where's the air support? Now would be a good time. They're on their way, a calm voice from the command center replied. Hold your position, Captain. A pilot screamed in panic as his mech was grabbed by the kaiju and lifted into the air. With a slight movement of its arm, the monster tore the mech apart and dropped the pilot into its mouth. Mar heard his colleagues' desperate screams over the comms as he fought for his life, only to be crushed and chewed. The gurgling, smacking sounds turned Mar's stomach. Hold our position. We're being wiped out. Our unit is as good as dead. Another mech was crushed underfoot, and Mar could only watch helplessly as one by one, his comrades were killed. Tony tried a close combat attack with his purple mech, but before he could execute it, he was struck by the kaiju's swinging tail and flung away. Tony died instantly upon impact, his mech crashing into a small building, causing it to collapse. Mar was the last one standing. As he continued firing, he commanded his mech's AI, Titaness, record a message for my wife. Understood. Recording. May, I love you, he said as the bluish kaiju stomped towards him. Tell the kids that. But he couldn't finish the sentence. The kaiju tore his mech apart faster than Mar could react. The shell around him disappeared, sparks flew, and rain splashed onto his face as he stared directly into the grinning face of the bluish megamonster. Come on, what are you waiting for? Kill me already. I'm deciding whether to crush you in my hand or eat you. The kaiju laughed, bringing the torn mech closer to its mouth. But I think I'll eat you. He opened his mouth wide, and Mar saw the enormous teeth and the massive tongue below. His heart pounded heavily as his mech was shaken until he lost his grip and fell into the gaping maw of the monster. He landed on the soft, slippery tongue and slid deeper into the throat. Mar knew this was the end. The city's last hope was that the Air Force or someone else could stop this heartless beast. Darkness closed in around him, saliva coated his body, and he felt himself sliding down the esophagus. Deeper and deeper. He knew the gruesome fate that awaited him. His last thoughts were of his family and everyone he was leaving behind. The kaiju swallowed contentedly, feeling the tiny human body land in its stomach. It was amusing how the little ones tried to fight against him as if they had a chance. For the mech pilots, the battle was brief and devastating. The kaiju left a trail of smashed mechs, crushed people, and destroyed buildings as it continued its advance into the city. The district lay in ruins, and the remnants of the brave mech pilots stood as a testament to a desperate but futile attempt to defeat the monster. Some time had passed before Kim slowly regained consciousness. Around her, the lights of her mech's cockpit flickered, and on the monitor, the other mechs of her team were marked in red with the word, destroyed, beneath them. She widened her eyes in shock. Captain. Captain. She called over the comms, but there was no response. Then, the command center responded. Lieutenant Kim? Are you still operational? Here. Kim. What? What happened? What about the team? Where is Captain Johnson? As far as we can see, they've all been destroyed. You're the only survivor. I repeat my question, are you operational? Kim took a deep breath, trying to push away the pain and grief. She quickly checked all systems. Thanks to the shield prototype, her mech was barely damaged. However, the shield was now offline. Another such attack would be fatal. My mech is operational, she replied coolly over the comms. What are my orders? Should I engage the monster again? Where is it now? I have no visual. Negative. Do not pursue the monster. The Air Force will launch the next attack in a few minutes. Okay. What should I do? We're receiving strange energy readings from the outskirts of the city, not far from your position. Investigate. Your mech is equipped with sensors. It could be a device or even a weapon of the alien monster. The green mech straightened and began moving out of the ruins. Slowly towards the new coordinates. Understood. On my way. Be careful, pilot. We've never seen such strong energy readings. It could be a bomb. But Kim could already see that it wasn't a bomb. In the distance, she saw an orange shimmering rectangle. She took another deep breath and reported over the comms. It's not a weapon. It seems to be a portal. And another kaiju just came through. I'm transmitting video. Lyxe stumbled out of the portal. Strangely, the transition had been rough this time. Whoa. What the? She gasped, stumbling forward and falling. Her massive body crashed to the ground, crushing several houses in this suburb of the city. Dazed, she got back up and checked the sensors on her wrist computer. What's going on? The display read, "Signal disrupted." She frowned. Her wrist computer was being interfered with by a jammer? Was that even possible? She had never experienced anything like this before. Meanwhile, Ben and Lily were huddled in terror in the basement of their half-destroyed house. They had been hearing gunfire and explosions in the distance for hours. It wasn't exactly comforting, but at least it was far away. Until now. A tremendous quake had thrown them to the ground. The booming was so loud that Dan's ears hurt. What was that? He cried out in fear. His sister hugged him to comfort him. "I don't know. I'll go check. Stay here, okay?" As she headed toward the staircase, her brother called out, "No, Lily. Wait. You can't leave me here alone." But she pushed him away, more aggressively than she intended. "Sorry. I'll be right back. I promise. Don't worry." Her brother sat down fearfully on the floor, burying his face in his arms. He was terrified and didn't want to be left alone. Lily took a deep breath and ascended the dust-covered stairs. The strange noises from outside were deafening. As Lily climbed the stairs, she could hardly believe what she saw. Through the shattered windows and gaping cracks in the walls, she could see the colossal body of another monster looming directly beside the house. From this close, the sheer size of the creature became starkly clear to Lily. Right in front of her was the gigantic soul of the immense figure, which had apparently sat down. The enormity of it overwhelmed her. The soul was clearly larger than the entire house, and each toe was bigger than Lily herself. Even bigger than cars. Lily was so frightened that she could barely breathe. She didn't dare to move forward or back. Paralyzed, she just stood there, trying not to make a sound. Just one movement from the monster would be enough to crush her like a fly. Not only could she see the intricate patterns of the gigantic, slightly dirty skin in front of her, but she could also feel the warmth emanating from the massive body and hear the rumble of Lyxe's slightest movements. Even the tiniest shift from the giantess made the ground beneath Lily tremble. Lily had to get away. Back to her brother. To hide again. Maybe that way, they could survive. Suddenly, Lyxe noticed a movement out of the corner of her eye and looked down. Her huge, friendly eyes fixed on Lily, and her lips curved into a smile. "Hey, little one," boomed Lyxe's voice kindly, but the volume made Lily's ears ache, and she felt the vibration of the sound throughout her entire body. Overwhelmed by fear, Lily jumped back. Her eyes were wide open, and her heart pounded so fast she thought it might burst from her chest. Without further thought, she turned and ran back down the stairs to the basement, then jumped up as he saw his terrified sister. "Lily, what's wrong? What did you see?" Lily gasped for air, trembling with fear. There's another monster out there. It's unbelievably huge. And it saw me." As if to underscore her words, a loud rumbling suddenly echoed around them. The ground shook, and the walls creaked as parts of the walls and the roof above them were lifted. Chunks of concrete and dust fell as the house was literally taken apart by the colossal fingers of the kaiju-girl. Rain now poured down on them as they looked up, paralyzed and trembling, at the gigantic being gazing down at them with curiosity. "Don't be afraid. I won't hurt you," the booming voice declared. When Lyxe noticed that the two children were utterly paralyzed with fear and her words didn't seem to reassure them, she realized she needed to try something different. She raised her arm and very slowly reached for the children with her massive hand. As she did so, she spoke again, this time in a whisper, which was still quite loud. "You poor things are completely traumatized and soaked. I'm sorry if I scared you. But I'm really not evil. I'll be very gentle." This didn't help much either, but Lily and then were so terrified that they didn't even try to run as Lyxe's fingers reached for them. They were gently pinched between her thumb and forefinger. They wouldn't have been able to escape anyway. Lily was certain that this was the end for them. And she hadn't even been able to protect her brother. The skin of the fingers pressed firmly against her body, and she could feel herself being lifted, the ridges of the skin squeezing her while she was lifted. She hoped the monster wouldn't eat them. Being crushed would be a much better death than ending up in its stomach. Or would it? At least the skin and pressure felt oddly comforting. Lily was confused. Just a moment later, the grip around them loosened, and they both fell into Lyxe's open hand. The enormous face before them smiled. "You too must be cold, being so wet." It's warm in my hand. I hope that's a bit more comfortable for you," she said, still whispering. Lily felt a breeze above her, caused by the kaiju's voice. "I'm Lyxe, by the way," she introduced herself. "I'm an axolotl kaiju. I admit, I'm a monster, but a nice one." "Really?" Then Lyxe lifted her other hand, creating a protective canopy over the two children to shield them from the pouring rain. She moved very slowly and carefully, so as not to frighten them further. "I mean you no harm," she whispered soothingly. "I'm here to help. Can you tell me what happened? I've received information that there's been an attack on this planet." "I came to help," then mustered all his courage, his small voice trembling, but he managed to speak. "Another monster, like you, came. It's attacking the city. It destroyed everything." Lily, astonished by Dan's sudden bravery, nudged him in the side. "She's just messing with you. She wants to play with us before she eats us." Lyxe heard that. She frowned and said, "I really don't want to eat you." "Why would you think that? And what monster? Do you mean giants like me? Has your planet been attacked by other giants? Did they eat people? Was it a blonde woman?" Lyxe suspected that the malevolent Ulrika might be behind the attack, but Lily replied angrily, "It was a monster. Just like you. You look almost the same. It crushed our neighbors mercilessly and ate others." "We won't be mocked." Lyxe listened attentively, her enormous eyes filling with concern and bewilderment. "Like me? That shouldn't be possible. Our civilization was wiped out." "Serves you right," the girl yelled, and for the first time, Lyxe felt truly hurt. But she could imagine that the girl had experienced something terrible and was traumatized. No wonder she was reacting with such anger, especially if another kaiju, possibly another Larkonian, was here killing humans. "Please believe me. I will do everything to protect you. And I will stop this other monster." She tried to keep her voice as gentle as possible to continue reassuring the children while she retrieved a small box from her backpack, which she usually used for transporting humans. The inside of the box was lined with soft materials and fabric to ensure the safety and comfort of the humans inside. In the distance, Lyxe could see plumes of smoke rising from the city, giving her an idea of where the monster was. But she asked just to be sure. "Is there anything else I should know? Is the monster armed?" Lily, now truly confused and uncertain if she had misjudged Lyxe, explained, "It came with a huge one-man spaceship. It's stationed over there near the mountains." She pointed in the direction, and Lyxe could see the ship in the distance. Lily continued, "Unfortunately, we didn't see if it has any weapons." Lyxe stomped toward the spaceship. "A starfighter? For a kaiju of this size? That's very interesting. I've never seen anything like this before." She realized that the jamming signal also was emanating from the ship. Activating her wrist blaster, Lyxe fired at the ship, but it had no effect. Unknown energy shields. Apparently highly advanced. This isn't good. She looked down at the children in her hand and raised the box with her other hand so they could see it. "I want to take you with me, for your safety. Would you please climb into this box? I need my hands free. I don't want to leave you here or put you in any danger." It was a strange request, and Lily was still extremely suspicious. She said, "If you really are friendly and want to help us, then let us down." Lyxe hesitated. She wanted to respect the children's wishes but feared for their safety if left alone. Finally, she sighed heavily and nodded. "I understand. I want to respect your decision." Slowly and carefully, she bent down, opened her hand, and gently let the children climb down to the ground. Lily and then now stood on solid ground again, their hearts still full of fear and uncertainty, especially when they looked up at this extremely massive kaiju-girl. Lyxe knelt down, trying not to appear quite as enormous, but she still looked just as immense and intimidating. Her huge eyes were filled with concern, but also determination. "Please take care of yourselves. I will do everything to stop this monster and protect the city. You should hide again, somewhere safe. Maybe in the basement of another house around here." Lily, still skeptical, crossed her arms and nodded curtly. "We will hide. But I'm not telling you where." Lyxe smiled faintly and raised a hand in farewell. "I hope I can change your opinion of my kind. Take care." With these words, Lyxe stood up again, her gigantic figure even more imposing at full height, especially against the backdrop of pouring rain and lightning from the storm. She waved goodbye to the children and turned to walk toward the city. Each of her steps caused the ground to tremble as she strode determinedly toward the source of the threat, Lily, and then watched her go, their hearts pounding, but no longer with fear. This Lyxe, or whatever her name was, had actually let them go. They didn't know what would happen next, but they fervently hoped that Lyxe was truly a kind monster and could save the city, but there were other things to do. They needed to find a new hiding place, as their house was now completely destroyed. They trudged through the pouring rain, past the deep footprints and the dead bodies lying in them. Lily tried to call their mother while keeping her younger brother's eyes away from the smushed corpses. But after a few minutes, she stammered, "I can't reach Mom." Something's wrong. Lyxe knew she couldn't waste any more time. She had to save the city and its inhabitants from the other kaiju. And she had to find out who was behind this attack and why. Her thoughts raced as she approached the city, ready to do whatever it took to protect the people and uncover the mystery. Fortunately, her shield still worked as she entered the densely populated part of the metropolis. Lyxe continued to walk through the increasingly crowded streets of the city. With each step, she left deep imprints in the asphalt, and inevitably, her gigantic feet trampled on some people who either remained confused in her footprints or even stuck to her soles. She felt a slight pang of regret in her heart. She knew the people were undoubtedly terrified, especially after the previous monster's attack. Yet, she couldn't deny that she enjoyed feeling humans under her bare feet again. The sensation of tiny bodies yielding beneath her weight was something she had missed. The people screamed and ran in panic. Some stumbled and fell into the deep imprints she left behind, while others stuck helplessly to her soles as she continued on her path. Lyxe looked down at the crowds below her with concern. "I'm sorry for stepping on you. But don't worry, you won't die under my feet. Everything will be okay," she whispered to herself, although she knew that most wouldn't believe her anyway. She was glad that the damage in the city wasn't too extensive yet and that most people were still alive. The buildings were largely intact, and the streets were still passable despite the destruction that had already occurred. Lyxe felt a mix of responsibility and even some joy as she marched through the city, determined to find and stop the enemy kaiju, but she didn't get far. Suddenly, a rocket exploded directly in front of her face. Fortunately, her shield protected her, but for a brief moment, she was blinded and couldn't see anything. Then she felt a hard blow to her neck. Gasping, she stepped back a few paces, clutching her neck and struggling for air. What the hell was that? Kim suppressed all her fears and tried to focus on the fight. Loud heavy metal music blared in her cockpit, getting her in the mood and helping her forget her worries. She knew she had no chance of surviving this battle, but she had to hold off the kaiju long enough for the Air Force to arrive, and apparently, her tactic was working. The purple kaiju-girl was thrown back and gasping for air. It seemed they were vulnerable after all. She hit the ground, rolled with her massive Aegis mech, and leaped again, swinging and striking once more as her missile launcher fired the last remaining rocket. If her plan worked well, she would force the kaiju back to the border of the city. Lily bit her lip as she tried once more to reach her mother. No answer. Desperation welled up inside her. "I have to find Mom," she muttered, looking determinedly at her brother then. "We're going into the city. I'm going to save her." "What? That's way too dangerous," protested then, but Lily was already heading to her bike. Without further hesitation, she climbed onto the saddle and pedaled away. Dan, frightened and uncertain, decided to follow her. He couldn't leave her alone. "I'm coming with you," he called out, mounting his own bike. Together, they rode towards the city, following the trail of destruction that Lyxe had left behind. Their journey took them over severely damaged streets, past distraught people and ruined buildings. They had decided to follow Lyxe, hoping that they might have a chance to find and save their mother, but then, as they descended a hill, they saw it. Lyxe was under attack by the military. Rockets and gunfire filled the air, explosions thundered around her. Lily held her breath as she took in the scene. Her heart pounded faster. That could be Dad," she whispered in panic. Her father, Captain Mar Johnson, was a mech pilot, and he could be in one of the assault mechs firing at Lyxe. "Oh no, Dad," murmured then, his voice trembling with fear. What if Lyxe crushes on him? A cold fear crept down Lily's spine. She couldn't let anything happen to her father. Without further thought, she pedaled harder and headed straight towards Lyxe. Then followed her, his eyes wide with shock and fear. "Lily, this is way too dangerous," he shouted, but Lily wouldn't stop. She had to talk to Lyxe, she had to stop her from hurting their father. The two children moved dangerously close to the battle. They could see Lyxe's gigantic form defending herself against the military's onslaught, explosions booming around her. Lily abruptly stopped her bike, jumped off, and ran towards Lyxe, getting as close as she dared. "Lyxe. Lyxe, please stop," she screamed at the top of her lungs, her voice cracking with desperation. "That could be our father. Please, don't hurt him." But the explosions, the crashing, and the thunderous sound of Lyxe's movements drowned out her voice completely, giving Lyxe no chance to notice the girl and her brother. Lyxe opened her eyes just in time to see another rocket hurtling towards her. "Ah!" she screamed, raising her hands to shield her face. But the explosion was even closer this time, so intense that it sent her flying back again. She crashed into a skyscraper. The people inside saw only her enormous body coming towards them before everything was consumed in a massive explosion of concrete dust and debris. Lyxe's body tore through the floors, demolishing everything. The entire building collapsed under her weight, crumbling to dust. Lily and her brother were luckily still far enough away. But when Lily saw an entire skyscraper, likely full of people, utterly destroyed, she was so shocked that she was almost paralyzed. Fear took over again, rendering her nearly incapable of making decisions or moving. Her brother parked his bike and ran to her. "Lily. Are you okay?" he shouted, panic in his voice. Coughing, Lyxe lay in the rubble, trying to get up. Fear surged through her as she realized she was in serious danger and had no idea what had just happened. But then she saw movement. Quickly, she grabbed the 20-meter-tall robot with her hand and lifted it up. She coughed and wheezed. "Hey! Stop that, or I'll crush you." Kim, still fueled by anger and adrenaline, struck at Lyxe's fingers with her mech, which were currently gripping her tightly. She shouted through the mech's loudspeakers, "Try to crush me, you giant bitch." The blows from the small metallic robot were indeed painful, but Lyxe gritted her teeth and hissed angrily, "I am not a bitch. I am a monster." With her other hand, she grabbed the head of the mech and pulled so hard that it tore apart. Around Kim, the metal cockpit was ripped away. She lost control of the mech, which was now just a pile of scrap. "Come on. Kill me, you monster," she screamed, tears streaming down her face, when Lyxe saw the helpless pilot inside and heard those words. Her expression softened, becoming almost concerned. She took a deep breath and looked intently at the pilot. "Listen to me, my name is Lyxe. I didn't come here to cause harm but to help. I'm looking for the monster that attacked your city to stop it. Can you understand that?" Kim was utterly bewildered, but the kaiju-girl's words seemed sincere. She nodded slowly. "Good," Lyxe responded, relieved. "So, are you on my side?" Kim hesitated at first but then nodded again. "Perfect. Then perhaps you can give me some answers and tell me what has happened and what you know." As she spoke, she was already moving on, wasting no time. What she didn't realize was that below her feet, Lily and her brother were on the street. The two of them watched in shock as Lyxe approached with thundering steps. Her feet were gigantic and yet moved with incredible speed. Lily and then stood close together, their hearts racing with fear and panic as they watched the massive Lyxe. With dust and chunks of concrete still falling from her as she came closer. "Lily, we have to get out of here," shouted Dan, but Lily seemed paralyzed, but it was already too late. Lyxe's foot came down incredibly fast. Before they could react, they were caught beneath the gigantic sole. The sensation of being struck by such an immense weight was overwhelming. In a single moment, their entire world was enveloped in darkness, pressure, and warmth. But instead of feeling pain, they were gently pressed into the ground. It was as if an invisible force protected them, enveloping them in a protective shield. The sole of Lyxe's foot was surprisingly soft and warm. It wasn't hard and unyielding as they had expected but felt more like a gentle pressure that spread evenly over their bodies. Lily and then felt strangely secure, almost as if they were being hugged, even though they were firmly pressed against the ground. Were they still alive? Or was this death? Why didn't they feel any pain? As Lyxe lifted her foot again, the siblings suddenly found themselves stuck to her sole. They dangled in the air, high above the devastated streets, gravity pulling at them slightly but not enough to dislodge them from the giant kaiju-girl's foot. The world seemed to rush by below them, then the ground came closer again, and they were pressed deep into the ground once more. Then, "Are you okay?" Lily called out in a muffled voice, still in disbelief that they hadn't been crushed to death. "Yeah, I think so," he replied, equally overwhelmed by the situation. "Even though we are sticking to her foot." "I know. I don't know what is happening to us," Lily screamed. As Lyxe continued walking through the city, Lily and then were swung back and forth, repeatedly and heavily yet pressed down. First it felt overwhelming, but after a while the movements were even and rhythmic, almost soothing, if not for the sheer size and power of Lyxe constantly reminding them how precarious their situation was. They could see the intricate details of Lyxe's soul above them, the massive grooves and soft folds that carried them. Gravity felt strange, lifting and dropping them with Lyxe's steps. It was like they were floating on a giant wave, carried up and down. The wind whistled around them as Lyxe pressed on in her search for the other kaiju. Kim was still trapped in the wrecked mech in Lyxe's hand. The metal remnants of the mech creaked under Lyxe's firm grip as she tried to free Kim. With a careful movement, she removed the remaining parts of the cockpit and placed her finger in front of Kim. Kim's heart raced, thinking Lyxe might crush her, but the huge finger remained still in front of her. She grabbed some skin ridges of the finger and held on tightly, and Lyxe gently pulled Kim out of the wreckage. The giant axolotl girl let the broken mech fall carelessly, crashing to the ground with a thunderous sound. "Are you okay?" Lyxe asked, her voice filled with concern as she held the tiny female pilot in her hand. Kim, still shaken and flooded with adrenaline, nodded weakly. "Yes, thank you. I'm okay." She was overwhelmed as she found herself in the gentle hand of the friendly giantess. But she felt strangely safe in her hand. She truly was different. "Good. Can you tell me what happened here? What is the other kaiju planning and where did he go?" Lyxe asked, her enormous eyes fixed intently on Kim. Kim took a deep breath and began to explain. She introduced herself and recounted how the kaiju had suddenly appeared without warning, causing the weather to go haywire and thwarting all attempts to stop him. Lyxe nodded thoughtfully. "Thank you, Kim. You've been very helpful. I know now to be on guard. The technology this kaiju possesses must be highly advanced," but just as Lyxe finished speaking, she was suddenly attacked from behind. Lurchy, who had been hiding behind a skyscraper, leaped at her and put her in a headlock. His massive arms pressed against Lyxe's neck as he laughed triumphantly. "So, another Larkonian here? That's astonishing. I thought we were wiped out. But even more surprising is that you're fighting for these pathetic little creatures." "Don't you know?" Lyxe struggled against the hold, gasping. "Let me go." "What don't I know? What are you talking about? Who are you anyway?" The strange kaiju hurled Lyxe against a skyscraper, which exploded under her immense weight. "These little creatures. Humans. They're colonizing more and more worlds, sending their mining ships everywhere, causing destruction. They're a plague that must be eradicated." Lurchy shouted angrily. "Join me, and together we can cleanse this world of them." Lyxe got back on her feet and stood, panting but ready to fight, before the bluish axolotl kaiju. "No. You're wrong. Every life is infinitely valuable. These humans are not our enemies. They have as much right to live as we do." Lurchy grew visibly angrier. "You are mistaken. They are not just weaklings and destroyers. They annihilated our world, wiped out our people. They must pay for that." Lyxe briefly opened her hand to check on Kim, who had seemingly lost consciousness again from the impact. She closed her fingers protectively around her, determined to defend both her and the city. Desperately shaking her head, she tried to persuade Lurchy. "No. That's not true. Your information are all wrong. Besides, there are many different civilizations with vastly different values. Every individual has unique beliefs and characteristics. You can't just condemn and crush them all. There is always another way." But Lurchy remained unmoved. His eyes glinted with anger and conviction. "You are blind, Lyxe. Too bad. I would have welcomed a friend. Suddenly, he attacked again, but this time Lyxe managed to deflect him and threw him away. He crashed into a row of buildings, crushing everything beneath his massive body. The two kaijus continued to grapple with each other as the city trembled beneath them. People everywhere were helpless and in absolute horror. Masses of people got stepped on by the kaijus or found themselves in collapsing buildings. Lyxe knew she had to find a way to stop Lurchy without causing more destruction. Her heart pounded wildly in her chest as she searched for a solution to save the people and herself. The area was densely populated, and even though her protective shield was active, it was too dangerous to fight here for long. They were causing immense damage in a city that was far from bad. And she didn't know how long her shield would work under such stress. She needed to lure him away. Amidst the struggle, Lyxe carefully maneuvered, pushing Lurchy further and further out of the densely populated area, drawing him away from the city. The bluish kaiju swung, but instead of striking her, he fired a blaster. Fortunately, the shot was absorbed by Lyxe's shield, but it wouldn't hold up under such immense firepower for long. She already suspected where the blue giant had gotten his technology. I can do that too. Lyxe shouted, activating her arm blaster and firing an orange laser beam at Lurchy. However, his shield seemed to absorb everything as well. Whoa. Nice toy. But it won't help you. My energy shields are perfect. Lurchy fired multiple salvos as Lyxe tried to dodge the shots while continuing to move out of the city. Unfortunately, they were still in an area filled with buildings. Some of the structures were hit by the shots and exploded, taking everyone inside with them. Mae Johnson was crammed into a shelter with hundreds of others, cowering in fear as loud crashes and thunderous sounds filled the air outside, and the ground shook violently beneath them. It sounded like a war out there. With a trembling voice, she spoke to herself, I hope Ma and the kids are okay. I should have tried to reach them. A man, overhearing her self-talk, sneered, your family is probably long dead. We should be grateful if we survive the day. Mae glared at the man. How could someone be so aggressive and nasty to others? Especially in such a dire situation? She glanced at her communicator. All phone lines were overloaded or down. No connection to the outside world. No idea what was happening out there. But the loud booming explosions and constant tremors hinted at something terrible. When Lyxe noticed that the malevolent Larconian was now fully enraged and focused on her, she began to sprint. As she ran, stamping the ground heavily, Lily and her brother, along with a number of other people, eventually fell off her foot and were left on the street. Those who were unlucky were crushed by Lurchy moments later, but the survivors, including Lily and Anne, braced themselves for a spectacle. Lyxe panted and ran as fast as she could. And she had to, because the blue axolotl was a full 40 meters taller than her, which made a significant difference in both strength and performance. But Lyxe had one more trick up her sleeve. Lurchy sprinted in a fury. How could this pink fool dare betray her own kind? She probably hadn't seen hundreds of ships bombarding the planet's surface with ray weapons. She likely hadn't lived in captivity or endured experiments on her. He ran, firing salvo after salvo. He knew it was only a matter of time before the shield of the pretentious anthroposophist failed. The thought of defeating her brought a psychotic grin to his lips, but suddenly, he was blinded by something extremely bright and pink flashing before him. He shielded his face with his hand but then lost his footing. There was an immense quake. And it seemed the tremor was so strong that even a giant like him was thrown to the ground. He rolled across the ground, taking a moment to reorient himself. Something was off. Around him were only smaller buildings. His rage had blinded him to the fact that Lyxe had lured him out of the city. But that wasn't the worst of it. Right in front of him was a wall of pink skin. As he looked further up, he saw a pant leg, higher still, a yellow t-shirt, and finally, Lyxe's face, now looking down at him. She was over 2 kilometers tall. 20 meters, to be exact. Grinning, she lifted her foot, panicked. Lurchy leapt to his feet and tried to run, but he wasn't fast enough. Lyxe's foot came crashing down on him, pinning him to the ground. Dust swirled around as he found himself under Lyxe's bare foot. His head was trapped between her toes, which were now large enough to crush him like a bug. Didn't see that coming, did you? I'm no ordinary Larconian, you know. Thanks to my technology, I can grow even larger. This is just my first growth stage. I can become 10 times bigger. But enough talk, are you ready to die? Panic surged through Lurchy, a feeling he hadn't experienced since escaping the research facility and crushing all the scientists. No. Please don't crush me, he whimpered, suddenly submissive and fearful. Lyxe, of course, had no intention of killing him, though she had every reason to. Oh, and why should I let you live? Give me one good reason. Lurchy desperately wanted to free himself, but the weight of Lyxe's foot was too heavy. He could barely move, even breathing was difficult. He had never been so humiliated. Under the foot of a girl, a Lurconian girl even, when he remained silent, Lyxe lifted her big toe slightly and pressed it down on his face. The skin bulged around him, and for a moment, he thought he would suffocate. But then Lyxe eased up, giving him room to breathe. Still nothing? You have no reason. Do you? Then I might as well crush you. It would be easy. I'd enjoy it, and you actually deserve it. You've killed thousands of people today. I should remove you right here and now. But first, tell me, how does it feel to be so small and helpless under my foot? To be a victim yourself, I know what it's like to be a victim. Lurchy suddenly roared. But Lyxe was unfazed. She didn't even ask what he meant. And so? Am I supposed to feel sympathy? Should I pity you because you were once a victim? That doesn't give you the right to kill others. Especially not masses of people, but they. He tried to argue, but Lyxe interrupted him again. What? Destroyed our world? Do you really think that? Maybe some humans were involved, but believe me, the masterminds were entirely different beings. You think humans are weak? How could they have destroyed our world then? They would need extreme power. If that were the case, why can you trample them here so easily without them putting up much resistance? It's simple. There are many different cultures with various traits and values out in the galaxy. Sure. There are evil humans, but this world here is not one of them. Quite the opposite. As far as I can tell, everyone here is trying hard to live in peace, even in harmony with nature. And you come here and kill thousands without a second thought. Are you going to crush me now? The demoralized blue axolotl asked. The heat under Lyxe's foot was becoming unbearable for him, and he could even taste the salt on her skin. Apparently, she was sweaty or had recently been in salt water. Or both. He felt humiliated and scared, aware that his entire body was trembling, which only added to his shame. Lyxe pressed her toe down on his face again. Should I kill you? Just crush you? Is that what you want? No, he roared, ashamed. I want to live, then think about this. The people you crushed or devoured today didn't want to die either. But you weren't as merciful as I am. I will never do it again, he said, his voice muffled by the skin of Lyxe's toe. Lyxe lifted her toe from his face and asked, what was that? I said I will never do it again. Lyxe suddenly smiled. That sounds much better. I'll let you live, but you have to stay under my foot for a while longer. I like the feeling of having you down there. Your body feels interesting under my soul. You're the first Lurconian I've ever stepped on. It's kind of special. Playfully, she rubbed her foot on him, pressing her toes against his face repeatedly. So, what's your name, anyway? Still trembling and humiliated by the ordeal he had endured, he said, my name is Lurchy. The gigantic toes kept rubbing against his body, occasionally pressing down hard. Lurchy? That's a funny name. Lyxe said, laughing, her booming voice echoing across the land. Then she grew a bit more serious and, whispering but still thunderously loud, said, I'm going to let you go, but I will make sure you never harm the people on this planet or any other worlds again. With my wrist computer here, I've scanned and recorded your life signs. I can find you anywhere in the galaxy now. And if you start causing trouble again, I'll be there in minutes. And next time, I'll be even bigger and a lot less nice. Believe me, she pressed her toe down on his head again, pushing it deep into the ground. I believe you, he shouted, filled with fear, thinking she had suddenly decided to crush him after all. But she lifted her foot off him. Okay, Lurchy, you can go. Dazed, he stood up, staggered for a moment, then took a few steps back, still looking up at the 2-kilometer-tall Lyxe with awe. Lyxe glared down at him. Go on, before I change my mind. He nodded, turned, and ran, panting, to his ship, and remember, I can find you anywhere. "You're like a living tracker for me now," she said, activating the scanners on her wrist computer. As Lurchy deactivated the shields of his ship to board, Lyxe scanned the vessel as thoroughly as she could. Having insight into this technology will be an advantage, she thought. The cockpit hatch closed, and the spaceship lifted off, flying away. As it left the planet's orbit, the rain abruptly stopped, and the weather cleared significantly. Within minutes, the sun was shining brightly again. Lyxe glanced at her wristband. Scan complete. Processing data. It read. She navigated through the menu and checked the statistics. Recorded deceased lifeforms, 988,761. Number of unrecorded deceased lifeforms unknown, estimated at 20,000, Lyxe sighed. She activated the blue beam of her wristband and swept it over the city. Most people were revived and fully restored, though not all. She shrank back down to her normal height of 200 meters to see and interact better with the tiny inhabitants of the city. At her towering 2,000-meter size, this was nearly impossible. Feeling more comfortable at her usual 200 meters, Lyxe had a few tasks left to complete. She checked her hand. The unconscious mech pilot was still there. "Hey Kim." "Kim." Lyxe whispered gently. Carefully shaking her to wake her up. "Kim, wake up." "The battle is over," Lyxe whispered soothingly as the battered mech pilot slowly regained consciousness. Kim blinked in confusion and looked around. She was momentarily startled by the face of the giant axolotl girl above her but quickly remembered that Lyxe was friendly and had helped her. "Lyxe? What happened?" "I defeated the kaiju." "It's over," Lyxe explained with a reassuring smile. At that moment, Then and Lily came running up, their faces beaming with excitement. "Lyxe! You did it! Oh my gosh, you were so incredibly gigantic. I mean, you're still huge, but your head was in the clouds just a moment ago. That was extreme." Lily exclaimed, jumping up and down with joy, then, looking at Lyxe with admiration, added, "You're a true hero. From now on, you're our favorite giantess. We always knew you weren't evil." Though that wasn't entirely accurate, Lyxe appreciated the recognition, especially from Dan, whose eyes sparkled with excitement. "I'm glad you see it that way now. And I'm glad I could help," Dan, fascinated by Lyxe's immense size towering above everyone, shyly asked, Can I stick to your soul again?" "It was so cool when you stepped on us," Lyxe smiled, blushing, and nodded. "Of course, but you'll have to stay there for a while. I can't focus on you all the time." She carefully placed her enormous foot on Dan and his sister, pressing down just enough for them to stick to her soul. Dan was elated, and even Lily had to admit that it felt incredibly soothing to be pressed into the warm, soft skin. Oddly, she felt absolutely safe and secure. Meanwhile, some people slowly emerged from the bunkers, their faces filled with fear and uncertainty. Lyxe noticed that most of the city's residents were still afraid of her. And no wonder. Just moments ago, she had been trampling and shooting her way through the city, stepping on crowds of people and demolishing buildings in her battle with Lurchy. She knelt down to be somewhat closer to the human's eye level, or at least not to appear so overwhelmingly huge and intimidating. She let Kim climb down from her hand and spoke gently to the crowd around her. "I know I look big and threatening, but I'm here to help you. I'm not like the other kaiju. I drove him away and I won't harm you. I promise." Lyxe had to spend quite some time convincing people until most of them were reassured. Kim and several survivors and revived individuals also supported Lyxe and spread the news. Hours passed, and gradually, the fear among the people began to fade, and many approached Lyxe with cautious curiosity, especially those still missing friends or family members. Lyxe smiled with relief, glad to have earned the people's trust. However, there was also much reason for sorrow, as Lyxe had to explain why many couldn't be revived, despite having brought others back to life. The explanation was difficult and particularly hard to understand for those who had lost someone. It was truly a harsh fate, causing an almost unimaginable grief for many. Lyxe also brought aid workers from her world through the portal to help rebuild the city and care for the injured. Among them were several Feringans, people from Anthro and other worlds. Many were specialists in large medical and technical teams. They all poured through the portal, coming to assess the damage and provide swift assistance. Once the worst of the chaos was under control, the planet's authorities reformed and began contributing to crisis management. Coordinated teams of military, fire departments, and rescue workers systematically searched the rubble for survivors. The authorities also took on the delicate task of identifying the crushed victims. This was particularly challenging, as many bodies had been flattened beyond recognition in Lurchy's footprints. Using advanced DNA analysis tools and personal items of the victims, the team was able to identify most of the dead. Families were contacted and informed, often leading to heartbreaking scenes of mourning. Amidst these extensive rescue and reconstruction efforts, Lyxe stood as a symbolic protector and helper. Her massive presence was still awe-inspiring. So many of those who were missing loved ones continued to flock to her. May also emerged hesitantly from the bunker with many others, desperately searching for her children. Like many, she had approached the giant pink kaiju-girl after overcoming her fear and had searched near her. Her heart leapt when she saw her children stuck to Lyxe's enormous soul, not only unharmed but seemingly having fun. With a gentle smile, Lyxe brushed the children off her foot, reuniting them with their mother. The joy of the reunion was short-lived, however. Soon after, they learned from the military, specifically from Kim, that their father was among those who could not be revived. Kim recounted how bravely their father had fought and what a hero he had been. But this was little consolation for the family that had lost their father. They were utterly devastated. Filled with such profound grief that they became unresponsive, Lyxe watched the scene unfold with a heavy heart. She heard many similar tragic stories, and it tore at her soul. She wept with the people and questioned whether it had truly been justified to spare Lurchy's life after he had caused so much suffering. Eventually, as the initial steps toward rebuilding were in full swing, Lyxe returned home to Magra. She knew her aid workers would continue to help, but she herself was utterly exhausted and could no longer bear the weight of the sorrow. Being an extremely empathetic being, the constant confrontation with grief and destruction on various worlds had taken its toll. Lyxe retreated to her cave on Magra, diving deep underwater and letting the silence envelop her. In this tranquility, she tried to process all the events and emotions. She began to suspect that she herself needed therapy to cope with the grief and pain she had so frequently encountered, in the darkness and solitude of the depths. Lyxe sought a way to heal her own emotional wounds and regain her strength. The burden of her decisions and the pain of the tragedies she had witnessed lingered with her, but she was determined to recover quickly. There were still many worlds out there in need of her help, and she wanted to be ready. She wanted to help wherever she could to prevent further suffering. The end. That was the story Lyxe vs. Lurchy. Lyxe and Lurchy are original characters from Cormany Media. We hope you liked the story. If so, give us a thumbs up and leave a comment. For more stories, subscribe to our channel. And if you want to support our work, check out our Patreon page. Thank you very much.